Paulo, você nos escuta bem? Paula, você nos escuta?
Murad, você está me ouvindo?
Ouvindo sim, Rui.
Oi, tá bom, obrigado.
Nada.
Eu estou sem som no computador.
Não, mas estou te ouvindo bem.
Ótimo, obrigado.
Agora sim. Eles estão sem áudio, só está com áudio. Okay. Em condições, hein? Bom dia a todos.
Bom dia, senhor vice-presidente.
Bom dia, senhor vice-presidente.
Bom dia, vice-presidente.
Bom dia, embaixador.
Bom dia, vice-presidente.
Bom dia.
Muito obrigado por ter aceito o nosso convite.
Satisfação.
Está travado aqui? Já vamos começar. Que hora vamos começar? Ah, é? Bom, então... Então, podemos começar?
Podemos, em condições.
Ótimo. Então... Muito bom. Cadê o... Como é que eu falo? Bom dia a todos. Muito obrigado pela presença.
Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. Good morning if you are located in Brazil, and good afternoon if you are located in Arab countries. We are now starting this very important webinar with His Excellency, Mr. Hamilton Mourão, the Vice President of the Republic of Brazil. Let me make a brief introduction before handing it over to our Vice President. It is important to highlight that the current context of COVID-19 has deeply changed the way we create relationships with other countries, and that includes foreign trade and the biggest sectors and industries. More than ever, it is important for us to discuss partnerships and collaborations so that countries can work together to foster discussions on how to find solutions such as technology, innovation, and especially in our case, in Brazil-Arab relations. And for this, food security is extremely important. At the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, we believe that this is a fruitful moment for the Brazilian government and the Arab governments to create a joint agenda to boost their economies and to help their countries thrive, encouraging a relationship between public and private sectors. Also, by diversifying the trade roster in these regions, we should expand to hospital supplies, agriculture, and we should add value to agribusiness, which right now is the biggest player for our trade. We should also invest in tourism, science, and technology. It is very important for us to talk about internationalizing investments in a concrete way between Brazil and Arab countries. More than ever, we need Arab countries to diversify their economies, to expand their industrial infrastructure, and this is a big opportunity for Brazilian companies. As we've said, we need to take food security into account very seriously, and Brazil is a big partner for that. Through new investments, we can create more jobs and offer more competitiveness in the world. We also have startups popping up in Brazil every day, and we could be investing in them. By working in this fruitful environment and by fostering foreign trade, investment, and cooperation, we know that we'll be working on something that is paramount for us. To talk a little bit more about this, among other topics, we have His Excellency, Mr. Hamilton Mourão, the Vice President of the Republic of Brazil. I now hand it over to you, Mr. Vice President. Hi, good morning. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Rubens Hanoun, the President of the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. I would also like to thank Mr. Osmar Shafi, the VP of Foreign Affairs, and the other members of the Chamber. Thank you very much for putting this webinar together. As Mr. Hanoun has said, Brazil and the world are probably facing their biggest challenge in this century, even though this century was just started. This pandemic has an impact on the health and well-being of our populations, as well as on its economies. I truly believe that we'll be able to overcome such adverse times together. Right now, in our international scenario, we've realized that we need to be truly prepared to face such dire circumstances. In my opinion, the response of multilateral agencies to the current pandemic were not enough to stop the spreading of this disease into different continents. Now, in a very timely manner, we need to encourage a revision of what we are doing and the protocols we are fostering in international organizations to be able to respond more appropriately to global crisis. The administration by President Bolsonaro has taken firm strides to fight the pandemic in Brazil. It's been supporting the population, and it's been safeguarding the achievements we had achieved in our economy last year. We have been making every effort possible so that coordinated initiatives between ministries and different governmental bodies will help the country face such a complex issue and challenge. We've been offering financial subsidies for the most vulnerable population, for companies, and for other governmental entities like cities and states. Of course, the measures that we have taken to fight this pandemic have had adverse effects on our economy, and that applies not only to Brazil, but to the world. Different industries of our economy have now been compromised because of a reduction in economic activity and because of a lack of balance in these markets in the long term. In this scenario, recovering our economy is a priority. We are committed to seeking more balance for the country as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. That is why we want to implement different initiatives and reforms into our country so that we can resume economic growth and start a new cycle. Now, the tripod of research, development, and innovation will be the key for this leap in productivity. And this leap in productivity will bring Brazil back onto a route of sustainable growth. It is important to strike balance between controlling this disease and fostering the Brazilian economy. The federal government has been working towards implementing measures in the short and long term to mitigate the damage that has been caused by COVID-19. First of all, we need to control the curve of this disease so that the Brazilian healthcare system can support it. We need to be able to offer healthcare services to everyone who needs it. Second of all, we are studying different economic measures so that we can keep the same curve of growth for our GDP at a minimum acceptable level. We've also been making efforts to safeguard the jobs of Brazilian workers. Our administration is also committed to having proper public accounts. I want to make that very clear. When we make an initiative of offering credit to companies or offering resources to workers who have lost their jobs or who depended on informal jobs, that does not mean that in the follow-up, we're not going to look for macroeconomic stability, because macroeconomic stability is paramount for Brazil to resume sustainable growth. It is important to emphasize that in such an urgent scenario, we are aware that the state will be extremely important to foster the economy and to create jobs. We are now increasing our expenditures with social protection measures. As a part of the day after planning for COVID-19, our federal government includes among its projects the Pro-Brazil program, which has been created by us. We've had the first 2 initial meetings, and this program is probably going to be ready between the end of August and beginning of September. Through this program, we're going to create incentives for priority public works. So according to the tax and financial resources that the Brazilian state has, will foster those infrastructure works, and we'll always look for different partnerships with the private sector. It is also important to notice that we have a robust portfolio of projects, and this will have an impact on our long-term development. PPE, one of the biggest privatization projects in the world has 163 initiatives at around $200 billion of worth. Its extensive program of auctions is now being adjusted to the obstacles presented by the pandemic. We want to cater to the demand that we see in the market and the demand that we see by financial operators. We are talking about a number of industries that are going to leverage our economy, from infrastructure to change the infrastructure in our country with highways, railways, airports, and ports, up to different enterprises like wind power, oil and gas, and others. And it is important to think about the pre-salt oil reserves with very low sulfur levels. This is a very green oil, the one that we produce through the pre-salt program. We are also prioritizing different policies to protect, preserve, and foster sustainable development of our nature, especially the Amazon region. We know it is important to use more robust policies to stop logging and illegal burning of the Amazon region, among other predatory activities that take place there. Now, after realizing this need, President Bolsonaro, at the end of January or beginning of February, activated the Amazon Council. The Amazon Council was created in 1995, but it was left behind. And now I am very happy and very honored to preside the Amazon Council. So after being re-established in February of 2020, the Amazon Council aims at coordinating and integrating public policies that are related to the legal Amazon region. Even though it is harder with the pandemic, the Council has already started working on creating immediate initiatives for this environmental area. The Ministry of Defense, the Environment, Justice, and our Institutional Safety Office have created a plan to stop unlawful activity in the region, especially logging and mining. As of last week, we created operations with the states of Rondônia, Amazonas, Mato Grosso, and Pará. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is not enough to just prohibit unlawful activity. We need to foster sustainable development projects and bioeconomy projects to appreciate the products and services that are based on responsible use of our natural wealth. That is why we are working on proposals and projects that are going to help us bring the Amazon region into a new era of knowledge and bioeconomy. We must remember that the forest is the livelihood and the home to millions of Brazilians. Natural and mineral wealth offer opportunities for profitable investments and sustainable investments. Brazil is one of the biggest global producers of food, and it is a reliable supplier. We've been able to produce high-quality food at very competitive prices, helping foster food security for a number of countries. This crisis has not had a negative impact on that ability. We have a large agricultural border, and we have states like Mato Grosso do Sul, Tocantins, and Goiás, and they are the least impacted by the pandemic, with very low levels of contagion. That applies both to contagion levels and the number of deaths. Right now, with the grain harvests, we're going to get to hundreds of thousands of tons, which is a 10% gain in comparison to the last harvest. We're going through deep changes in how we produce science and technology. And we are breaking down the traditional frontier between industry, agriculture, and services. And there is a concept that I think is extremely important here. We often talk about creative destruction in capitalism, and this has been happening nonstop because new technologies are now being continuously adapted and adopted into different steps of ideation, production, and distribution of goods and services. Our agribusiness is the fruit of scientific development. It is a successful case of the continuous absorption of innovation into our economy. Our farmers now work with no-tilling systems. They also have precision agriculture, very modern irrigation or dripping techniques, efficient management, and efficient data processing technologies, in addition to biotechnology. Brazil has a firm commitment to strengthening commercial or trade cooperation with Arab countries. The numbers of this trade show how big our relationship is. We have strategic relationships with these nations, and we have built them over the years. We have first-level relationships with countries in the Arab League. Last year, that represented over $12 billion. Those numbers place the Arab countries as the third biggest trade partner for Brazil, ranking third only to China and the US. Countries in this region are big importers of Brazilian products, especially the ones coming from agribusiness. As we all know, Brazilian manufacturers are a highlight, especially because they export foods that are produced and manufactured according to the principles of the Islamic culture, a market that is estimated at $1.3 trillion with almost 2 billion consumers. However, we do have an opportunity to expand this exchange. That is why we have been seeking to strengthen our relationships and to foster an environment that is going to boost our relationships with this region. We can add a lot to each other. In addition to the cooperation that we already have, we could have new collaborations in infrastructure, agribusiness, transportation, power, science, technology, innovation, tourism, and hospital supplies. There's a lot of potential for growth in these areas. The PPE projects, which I have already mentioned, are a great opportunity for collaboration in interest areas, especially after the pandemic. Trade with this region will allow us new opportunities for Brazilian exports. Gulf countries, especially Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman, have very advanced infrastructure, and they have specific legislation for the special trade zones, for example, the zones that process exports. They could be able to help us send Brazilian products over to other markets. Brazil and Arab countries have very, very important mutual investments as well. We have Brazilian companies in the Gulf region through different offices and manufacturing units. Over 30 of our companies have permanent offices in Arab countries, and they are in direct touch with their customers over there. It is also important to notice that we have Arab investments in Brazil. Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, for example, have an estimated investment of over $5 billion in our country each. Another topic we should explore in the near future is this desire to have a direct sea route. And why not call it the Belt and Road Brazil-Arab countries? Because we want to make trade easier between us. This is an initiative that should be a goal that is going to hugely benefit our countries. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I want to leave on a note of optimism. Just like in the past, Brazil and the world will be able to overcome this challenge. And during crisis, we also have opportunities, and we need to be able to take those and make the most out of them. Through our partnership, we'll be able to help each other recover our economies, and we'll certainly be able to help each other foster the development and well-being of our populations. Once again, Mr. Hanun, Mr. Shafi, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity. And now we can go back to talking.
Opa, desculpa, meu microfone estava desligado.
I apologize, my microphone was off. Once again, thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your words. As you said, we will overcome the challenges and we will find common opportunities between Brazilians and Arab countries. As you know, in this webinar, we have established a different structure so that we could talk to you. We have all the head members of our Chamber of Commerce to talk to you. Our vice presidents have specific questions for you. We will start with our administrative vice president, Mr. Mohamed Murad. He is going to ask you the first question. Good morning, Mr. Hanun. Good morning, Mr. Vice President. It is a pleasure to have you here with us this morning. I would like to ask you a question about investments. Brazil has achieved a very important role in the food industry in the Arab countries. What should we do to also gain our share in the investment portfolio of Arab funds? What could the Brazilian government do in the future to attract Arab investments, since Brazilian assets have never been this attractive before, as you mentioned? And finally, how can the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce help overcoming this challenge? Thank you for your question. What I have said regarding the attraction of investments is kind of a standard answer that I have been given. I believe that what Brazil needs to do to show investors, we should show that we are a reliable partner. The Brazilian government and Brazil as a whole needs to solve our issues so that we can have a propitious environment for business. Because you know very well that trust is the basis of any relationship. We should be stable, we should have clear understanding, and a less regulated system when compared to what we have today. We should also work in a cordial fashion. We should also have relationships at the same level of quality. We should attract investors and not posing barriers, whether they are cultural or ideological. We should be very pragmatic and flexible enough to understand that we need to pursue the convergence of interests. And as Ambassador Chaffee knows very well, the basis of the diplomatic work, which is the constant pursuit of common benefit. If Brazil acts as such, so if Brazil shows itself as a reliable partner in breaking down barriers and establishing a coherent dialogue, I am sure that investors, notably those from Arab countries, will come to invest in Brazil because they know that when they will bring their resources to Brazil, they will have the return they want in the future.
Senhor vice-presidente, a Câmara, como poderia... Tem
And how could the chamber help you? I believe that the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce can be a facilitator, can build this bridge between the parties, and oftentimes guiding the work of the government officials, indicating which is the best way we can hold our positions with our friends from the Arab world. Thank you, Mr. Murad, and thank you, Mr. Vice President. There is no doubt that this is the right path to take. Our projects and of our Arab partners show interest in that, and they have shown this interest oftentimes. Now I would like to turn over to Ambassador Osmar Shofi, who is so familiar with these relationships. He has good relationship not only with Arab countries, but he's a master in relationship with many countries. He has a question to Mr. Vice President. Ambassador Shofi is our Vice President of Foreign Relations. Thank you, Mr. Hanoun. Good morning, Mr. Vice President. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. My question has to do with the topic you have already addressed in your introductory remarks. It has to do with the possibilities of investing in the Amazon. One of the attributions of the council you preside is to establish policies and action plans for the sustainable development of the Amazon. Do you expect to get direct foreign investments or resources from abroad for this project? Could you invite major sovereign funds from the Arab region to invest in national products? Thank you for your question, Mr. Ambassador. The Council has 3 different commissions. One of them has to do with sustainable development. One of the roles of this particular commission is the pursuit of investments to fund projects that we can implement, trying to take the best of Amazon's resources. There are 2 different types of projects. Those that invest in biotechnology and in the economy of knowledge by getting into that region and to leverage their potential without causing damage to the environment. And there are other projects just for the maintenance of the standing forest. Those projects related to the global carbon market. Those are opportunities that I foresee, and the Commission of Sustainable Development is working on that. In my understanding, the Arab sovereign funds would have a great opportunity there because today there are not many direct investments from foreign countries except from some investments in the Amazon Fund, which are still being disputed. So we could use that for Amazon sustainable development. I'd also like to highlight that there is a subcommission of international relations to facilitate our contact with other countries in the world pursuing these investments. So, Mr. Ambassador, just as a very clear answer to your question, we count on your support as the Vice President of International Relations of the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce to help us establish this relationship to get investments from the sovereign funds to projects we are already implementing in the Amazons, whether they are specific of the federal government or of the governments in the state levels. Mr. Ambassador, Maybe we could check those projects and establish a program so that we could take those projects to the Arab sovereign funds, discussing with them what these projects are about. There is no doubt that they would be interested in that. They will be interested in making investments in Brazil. That's very good, since those projects already exist and are already designed. We could work together. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Vice President, with Mr. Rui Carlos Gomes, our Vice President of Foreign Trade.
Bom dia, Excelência.
Good morning.
Estão me ouvindo?
Can you hear me? Yes,
Obrigado.
perfectly. Loud and
General,
clear.
nesse momento de desafio mundial, o
In
Brasil, a
this
partir de agora,
moment of
estará
a
sendo
global
demandado a
challenge,
exportar
Brazil
mais
will
para o
need
mercado
to export
árabe,
more to
volume
the
de
Arab
produtos de
countries
origem
with a
animal e
volume
vegetal,
of
produtos
products
alimentares.
of food
Isso vai
and
reforçar a
animal
nossa
origin
posição
that
na
will
região,
strengthen our
e muito,
position in the
porque
region.
nós já somos hoje dos maiores exportadores
Today, we
de
are
proteína animal
one of
para
the
o mundo árabe.
largest exporters of
Assim,
animal
eu
protein to the
perguntaria
Arab
como
world.
nós poderíamos trabalhar, governo, a Câmara
How
Árabe,
could we work
junto com as
together, the
entidades
government
privadas,
and
no
the
sentido
Chamber
de
of Commerce
implementar
with the
linhas
private sector
diretas
so that we could
marítimas entre o Brasil e os
implement
países árabes,
direct sea
o que
routes
traria uma
between
redução
Brazil
de
and the
custos de
Arab countries,
frete
which would
e,
reduce freight
naturalmente, um
costs.
produto nacional mais
Naturally,
competitivo, então.
our national
Menor tempo de
products will be
trânsito, como
more
também segurança entre as
competitive,
partes no
shorter transit
fornecimento dessas
times,
mercadorias. Como é que
and
Vossa Excelência
also
acredita
ensuring
que o
those
governo poderia
products.
apoiar essa iniciativa?
How do you believe that the government could support this
Obrigado.
initiative?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Curie. And this may sound as a very simple question, but we need to truly unlock the potential that we have for our ports. In Brazil, we need to pinpoint and find the ports that could receive products from the Arab countries and that could export products from Brazil into the Arab countries. It is also important for us to establish common legislation to make the transportation of these goods a little bit easier and more quick. Obviously, I also know that the transportation infrastructure needs to be improved. We haven't invested a lot on the navigation infrastructure in Brazil in recent years, but we do know we have infrastructure from other parts of the world that could be used. I think a committee from the government should sit down together and discuss this topic. I will try and talk about this with Minister Braga Neto. He is the one who controls the governance center for the Brazilian government. We need integration, and we need to bring together the infrastructure ministry, the mines and energy ministry, and the agriculture ministry, because they are the ones that are going to gain the most from it. This is how we're going to have this working. It is all about taking the initiative, you know? We need to go from conversations into action, and we need to sit down together and see what we should do effectively on both sides so that we're able to create this connection. This is how we'll be able to get to easier trade flow at lower costs and consequently with profit for both sides. That's what I think about what
obrigado,
you have
Excelência.
asked me,
Muito obrigado.
Mr. Curie. Thank you very much, Mr. Mourão. I also think it's important to remind you that we've been with Mr. Hanafi, the Secretary General of the Union of Arab Chambers last year, and we were discussing this topic with him. Right now, This topic is a priority for the League of Arab States. So, Mr. Vice President, they really want to create a direct sea route. And I think you have been invited to be a part of a logistics forum in Alexandria, where they were also going to discuss this topic. Unfortunately, because of coronavirus, they ended up postponing this forum. Let's see if they are going to reschedule it. But I'm just saying that because this is a topic that has been thoroughly discussed by Arab countries. And it is important to stress the role that Mr. Mourão is going to play in this. You're going to have a very important role. And thank you very much. Now I would like to hand it over to Mr. Riyad Yunis, our VP of Marketing. Right now, he is also involved in coronavirus conversations because he is a physician. Thank you very much. Mr. Vice President, we're very happy to have you here at the webinar of the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. We are going through a medical and economic crisis all over the world, and this could be an opportunity for us to rethink everything that we have been doing. My question is, what is your take on the impact of bilateral agreements between Brazil and the Arab countries? That the Brazilian government has a strategy to encourage Brazilian companies to invest in the Arab region. Would you encourage Brazilian companies to invest in the Arab region, not only the other way around? Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Yunis. Right now, we have the Egypt-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement. And we used to have conversations and negotiations for other agreements with Tunisia and Morocco. But unfortunately, we've lost traction a little bit. Now, Mercosur is going through a tough time when it comes to bilateral agreements because of Argentina. As you know really well, Argentina is going through a tough crisis, a very serious crisis in their economy. This economic crisis in Argentina has been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. Around 20 days ago, Argentina basically left the table of bilateral negotiations. Paraguay, which right now is the temporary president of Mercosur, is now keeping on trying to look for bilateral relationships, along with Uruguay and Brazil, of course. We've been talking about agreements with Canada, Singapore, and Korea. And of course, we need to resume our discussions about these agreements with Arab countries. Let me be very honest with you. Right now, I think this would be a little bit tricky because of Argentina. You see, we need to regroup within Mercosur. Even politics have been a point of pain or a pain point for this kind of relationship. We need to regroup and we need to bring Argentina back into the game. They have short-term debt expiring very soon. They are negotiating with creditors. They could incur in fines. This crisis is obviously going to affect Mercosur. Brazil is still able to hold bilateral agreements. But the ones that had been worked on and everything that we have been fostering cannot be left behind. And we know that we can add value to these operations. And right now in the world, food security and food production is extremely important. And we have a lot to add to this game. In the past, I was talking to the Vice President of Argentina, Gabriela Michek, and we were talking about creating this beautiful breadbasket for food in the world. We need to go back to that idea. We need to make sure every country benefits from that. I know Brazil cannot forget that we always need bilateral agreements. Now, let me move on to the second part of my question. Does the Brazilian government has any strategy on how to encourage Brazilian companies to invest in the Arab region? We've been discussing that since last year. Minister Teresa Cristina, our Minister of Agriculture, has been a very influential player, especially before our companies. Now, last year, she went on a trip, on a mission to Arab countries. Right now, what I see is our government clearly understands that we need to increase penetration of Brazilian companies in the Arab world. Even state governments are doing that right now. I am in touch with the state government of Minas Gerais, and they are trying to establish new initiatives by looking for smart cities and by trying to invest in smart cities. This is another way of supporting our companies. And of course, Apex has a very important role in that. Apex Brazil will be able to help us make our companies more robust and help them invest, especially in Arab countries. That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Let me please add something to that, because I would like to talk a little bit about the role of the Arab-Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in internationalizing our Brazilian companies. We see this opportunity for Brazilian companies to go to Arab countries, and Arab countries have been fostering this idea. When President Bolsonaro visited Arab countries, we signed an agreement with TAGRI, an agency from the Saudi Arabian government that helps companies. So they are offering incentives for Brazilian companies to start their offices in Saudi Arabia. And we have this agreement with them for a number of industries. We already have an international office located in Dubai. And this year, we'll probably open another office in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. We'll have another one in Cairo, Egypt. Through those regional offices, we'll be able to provide you with more support and offer more opportunities both for Brazilian companies and for Arab countries that are interested in holding collaborations with Brazilian companies. I think this is the right moment for this kind of partnership and collaboration, and this is a very interesting perspective for Brazilian companies. Now we have a question from Mr. Nahid Chikani, our Treasury Director.
Obrigado, Presidente Rubens Anum.
Thank you very
Senhor
much, Mr. Hanun.
Vice-Presidente Hamilton Mourão, agradecemos muito a sua participação nesse webinar da Câmara de Comércio Árabe Brasileira. A minha pergunta refere-se ao assunto bitributação. Como o senhor analisa a possibilidade de efetivamente discutir-se o tema bitributação, uma vez que fomentaria a atração de investimento externo tão necessário e bem-vindo para o nosso Brasil, por favor.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Chikani. In one of the previous questions, I was talking about the business environment. Now, double taxation is one of the burdens that investors need to carry when they move to Brazil, and we need to alleviate this burden. The government wants to create a stronger framework, a stronger bilateral framework through agreements with Arab countries to avoid double taxation specifically, creating facilitated trade in the region. Now, these options and tools are going to offer a safer environment for investors. Last year, we signed a cooperation agreement and trade facilitation agreement with the United Arab Emirates, with a convention to eliminate double taxation on income and avoid tax evasion or tax avoidance. So I see this instrument that has been executed with the UAE could be also copied and pasted to other countries. I know you understand these documents, and maybe you can find a way to take these proposals to other Arab countries. So little by little, we'll be able to create a more robust infrastructure with the countries that are interested in fostering better collaborations with Brazil. Of course, this is going to hugely facilitate trade and help us decrease this hostile environment that we have in Brazil when it comes to investors.
Muito obrigado, senhor vice-presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. I would also like to ask our Vice President a question. After the COVID-19 crisis, several events had to be canceled, including our Brazil Arab Countries Forum, which was going to be held in April. However, in November, we have the G20 meeting to be hosted in Saudi Arabia. The G20 summit will be a great opportunity to follow up on the visit by President Bolsonaro last year. His mission to Arab countries was excellent. They were able to work on a number of investments. And we think now we have a great opportunity to follow up on that visit and to work on the presence of a lot of Brazilian people. What do you think about having a lot of Brazilian people at this event? And how can we work together so that we have this beautiful Brazilian group at this event to foster our relations? Yes, Mr. Hanun, you're right. Let's hope everything goes back to normal and we're able to host or actually to attend this G20 meeting in Saudi Arabia in November. This would be a great opportunity for Brazil to go to Saudi Arabia with a significant amount of people. It would be a great opportunity for us to strengthen our relationships, to close our ties, or to strengthen our ties, and to start new agreements with countries in the Arab League, because we'll be in the region for the G20 meeting. Now, with the support from the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, we can start working on an agenda to talk to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, both at a national and at a state level. Now, with this agenda, when we go to the G20 meeting, we'll be more prepared. And if we are there for the G20 meeting, we can take this opportunity to also have other side conversations to try to find solutions for all the problems that we have discussed so far. So we can get started as soon as possible, and I think you are going to play a very important role to build this agenda and to talk about specific points. So Mr. Hanoun and my friends who are here, I pride myself in being objective, and I want to really build something that can stand on its own. It's not only about talking about it. I want us to be happy, and I want us to establish goals that we'll be able to achieve. This will be a very, very important opportunity for us to improve our relationship.
Okay, we will start working on that. That's very good. Another point that I would like to bring up, and I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the participation of our Arab ambassadors who are watching this webinar and who sit in Brasilia, as well as the Brazilian ambassadors who are in Arab countries. But this is a question that comes from the ambassadors in the Arab countries. What we have heard, including in the visit we had in the beginning of the year, is something that gives Brazil a role of leadership, a leading role to establish an OPEC of food products with Argentina as well. Brazil is one of the largest producers of food products. So it's interesting for them having food security. They are very loyal customers. So they look at Brazil and they want to understand this responsibility. So this is the question that Arab countries have asked us. So how can Brazil take over this leading role, and how can Brazil help Arab countries right now and in the future in this leadership role? So how can Brazil take this leading role and set the new path? Well, I'm very honest. Brazil has to take this leading role. Even in South America, we are the largest country in terms of size, of natural wealth, market, population, culture. So we need to be like a magnet so that other countries in South America, especially our fellow countries in the Mercosur, can help us so that we can have more weight in international relations. Right now, in the pandemic, I believe that the global geopolitics will be rearranged. We will no longer be peripheral countries. I think we will have a more active voice in the Council of Nations. And I'm very honest, I think that in Brazil, we need to solve our own issues and to stop all the fights that we've been having and reorganize ourselves. And once we do that, we will have conditions to attract our friends from South America and to present ourselves to Arab countries as a reliable group who is capable of reaching common benefit and take to the Arab countries what is important to them, especially in terms of food security. And we can also bring from the Arab countries products that we need in our region so that we can have a very good and balanced trade. So Brazil needs to acknowledge that we need to take a leading role. This leadership is built. There are two values that I have followed because of my profession. Leadership is built based on example, on a role model, and knowledge. Thank you very much. I loved your answer. I think that we are on the right path. And this is exactly the moment to reassess the path to be taken. At the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce, we work with the Brazilian government, with sector representatives of logistics, not only of Brazilian countries, but of Brazil, but also of Arab countries, reassessing our relationship and to strengthen it. So it's good. We know that we can improve it in the sense of expanding these relations. Not that it is bad, it's a good relationship, but it can get better. Now, hearing your position that yes, we can take this leading role, I am sure that we have an open path to follow. Unfortunately, I know that we have run out of time, but I would like to thank once again Mr. Moran for your presence here with us. We had countless questions that unfortunately will not be able to ask you right now, but all of them will be answered later by email. I would also like to thank the participation of the Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your availability and for your partnership with the Chamber. You're always very transparent, open, and available. Let me remind you that the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce is available to participants, to members, to the ambassadors in Arab countries to discuss our relationships. On next Friday, we will have a webinar about health and culture with Mr. Yunus. It will take place next Friday at the end of the day. We are also holding a campaign for donations for some hospitals. Thank you very much. Shukran to our Arab partners. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Hanun. Thank you to all vice presidents who were with us with webinars, and shukran.
Posso sair aqui?